Okay, how you doing? My name is Gary St. Fleur, and this is Save Scranton. Um, I want to talk a little bit about my ideas on what I think should take place in Scranton. Now, I don't want this to be a little pedantic and become this long, drawn-out rigmarole about budgets and taxes. Let's make this a little bit more fun. Imagination is truly the driving force of creation. If you think about the past, everything that we see now first had its origins in an idea, right? Someone had to dream it up, envision it, believe it's possible, and then execute. Oftentimes, people get caught up in thinking about the past and what has transpired and using that as an indicator for what the future holds. But that's not completely accurate. Just think about it. Before the Wright brothers took flight, there were no planes. Now, can you imagine a conversation with probably the best minds in engineering discussing the theory of flight? They would, of course, have said, it's not possible, or history shows that any attempts that were made to take flight failed. But that doesn't mean it's not possible or that it could not happen, obviously. It did. The same thing goes for any change or anything that requires change and innovation. When I talk about Scranton, I don't talk about the Scranton that was or the past experience of Scranton. I talk about what Scranton can be. The fact that this place is situated topographically the way it is actually bodes a great deal in its favor. But of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. When it comes to innovation and ideas, I cannot even begin to express the amount of dynamism and change that can foster when other people bring ideas to the fore. But let's give some basic ideas that can set the groundwork from which to build this edifice of change and progress. First and foremost, I believe that the environment that people are in can either reward, encourage, and champion change, innovation, and competitiveness, or it can punish it. These are discussions that go into like corporate culture and how firms and even countries adapt and change and innovate for the betterment of the future. Now, one of the things that I believe everyone in Scranton can say honestly is there is this block when it comes to trying to experiment or innovate. For instance, just recently, probably a couple of months ago, the Steamtown Mall announced that they were moving a community college there. And that was supposed to be a great thing. Now, you have a situation where you have a college that could have, a mall that could have been a place with innovative shops, maybe a VR center to experiment with virtual reality, which is making headway now, or even something like a Dave & Buster's, where a family and young people can go and spend time. But you bring a community college. Now, the thing about a community college is the type of people that are going to come there, not to say that there's anything wrong with them, but they're young. They're out of high school. They're probably trying to learn a trade or something to get an associate and go on their way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nevertheless, you do have a large population of young people that's going to be in the mall. Now, from my understanding of malls, you're probably going to have loitering. You're probably going to have some schisms or whatever other type of things that transpire when a large group of young people get together. This means that there'll be competition for other groups of people who aren't part of the rowdiness or the fray, as it were. So families, young professionals are not going to find their needs being met at the mall. Also, I can't stress enough that in 2016, the amount of breakthroughs and trends that are happening and just innovations in restaurants or shops or technology should mean that there should be this willingness to experiment because the returns that were down to you are warranted. Consider if you were able to invest in Microsoft when it first came out. Funny story about that. At one time, Microsoft was trading at 10 cents. If you put $10,000 in Microsoft at that time, it would have been worth $100 million 10 years later. Now that's pretty impressive. But that just goes to show what happens when you take hold of a good idea, when you experiment with something new. I was talking to someone today, and I was explaining to them my very concept about how I go about looking at these things. And I told her that once you introduce something new, you completely change the calculus. It's no longer the same game. Now, if we use the trajectory of what has been, if we just look at Scranton in terms of its past experiences, then yes, it may be difficult to look forward. It may be a problem to change things. But if we introduce new ideas, if we look at it differently, not by what it is, but what it can be, I'm certain that not only Scranton will change for the better, but it'll be better than it ever was. And I really believe that the secret to saving Scranton is new ideas. Having people who are not burdened by the legacies of the past, who are not depressed, who are not downtrodden due to the political machinations. And trust me, I don't say that these people are wrong for feeling this way. But the amount of things that I've seen with the government is corruption, with the pay-to-play mechanisms that are so pervasive in this region, it makes sense that the people would be depressed and downtrodden. And it would make sense that they would be suspicious of anyone talking about a change. I can't even begin to imagine growing up in Scranton, and being surrounded with politicalization of almost everything. I was talking to a guy the other day who owns a shop, and he was telling me, like, people aren't paying their taxes. The people who are paying their taxes are paying too much for it. And there's lack of fairness in the city. And the economic prospects are dwindling. Of course, we've had this conversation plenty of times. And my thoughts on this was that, yeah, taxes need to be driven down, but also the morale and the ethos of the city has to change. Now, of course, it is. You have a strong contingent of people who are trying to change the spirit of the city. You have the Scranton Fringe Festival that's putting on art displays, performances. You have Friends of Lackawanna that are championing environmental concerns. Scranton Made that's helping businesses. And I think that is awesome. We need more of that. And I believe that will come, but only when there's this acceptance of the new, where we release the status quo and establishment thinking that has resulted in a declination of the city, its economic prospects, and population. They speak of this brain drain that transpired in this place, and it's obvious why. We need to reverse that tide. And the only way that happens is by saying to the world that Scranton is ready for a change and is ready for something new. I'm glad that you listened to this podcast. There'll be much more going forward. And I hope you have a wonderful day.